Wow, it is so exciting to be here today. Oh my gosh. Since this is the educational presentation, I'll diverge a little bit from the standard Toastmasters beginning, where you don't say thank you, thank you, thank you, but I need to say thank you to Debbie Woodbury, who found me on LinkedIn simply by typing coach. That must mean my SEO is doing great, my search engine optimization. And then there's amazing Maggie, who after we went over the meeting and I knew what was going on, talked on a personal level for like another half hour. And I know, gosh, she's my friend for life. Both of them are. So, wow, I have to say all that just as by way of introduction. Now, have you ever thought of connecting the dots between the Clifton Strengths Assessment, formerly StrengthsFinder, and your experiences on social media? Anybody ever thought about that? I hadn't. Seriously, here I'm giving this talk all smarty pants, right? It was earlier this summer when I finally started to connect these dots. I don't know why I didn't do it earlier. Here's how I got involved with, I want to keep seeing you guys. So I'm going to go back to a gallery view. Here we are. Okay. I am a longtime Toastmaster, is what's stated in the introduction. Well, in 2005 in Toronto, the Golden Gavel Award winner was none other than Marcus Buckingham, who co-wrote the initial book, you can all see this, I hope, on StrengthsFinder back then, with, of course, the man himself, Donald Clifton, who came up with the idea of really helping managers, especially to help all of us, ourselves, play to our strengths, honor our strengths, think of our strengths as our unsullied talents, yet with resources invested into them. Well, what is the Golden Gavel Award? The Golden Gavel Award is given every year by Toastmasters to a non-Toastmaster who epitomizes excellence in communication and leadership. Okay, that's Marcus Buckingham. Why not Clifton? He had died by then, sadly, by 2005. We have, just like with Smedley, we have the legacy of Smedley, we have the legacy of Donald Clifton. Well, at that time in 2005, I was newly elected as a district governor, now called a district director. So even though I wasn't paid as a manager, I managed 50 people on my district team. And then I had I'll call them my sidekicks in a sense, the two people that are right part of that district trio, as they call it, now the club growth director, program quality director. As soon as I got home, I gave them each this book and said, I need you to take this assessment so I can be a better leader and manager with you. It was super helpful. I really was excited about the strengths program and knowing my own strengths, although at that time, I only found out the top 5 strengths. I wasn't curious enough yet to dive into knowing the rest of my strengths in order. Well, then kind of just quickly collapse how I got into the other 3 assessments, wandering through a bookstore 9 years later. By then, I'd retired from the field of sales. It was 2014. It was a year into my business. And I ran across Tom Rath's book, StrengthsFinder, which is a quicker read. And I usually recommend it over the initial book because just to make sure you read something. And you get, of course, another code. Okay, that was good. So that I found out what my strengths were at that time. 4 years later, found another book by Tom Rath, Strengths-Based Leadership. And any of you, especially if you're in district leadership now or even club leadership, you might be interested in this particular book, though I don't recommend it as a first book. I even got to take the assessment one more time in November of 21, through a leadership program I was in with my local Chamber of Commerce out here in the Denver area. All that I tell you to say it took me all those years before I really delved more deeply into the Clifton strengths. And it was after the 3rd assessment when my connectedness strength, which I value so much, had dropped off. And I was frankly so pissed that I wanted to know what happened to it. So I paid the extra $50 that it takes to find out all 35 of your strengths, page after page after page. And there was connectedness, number 6, just under the top 5. I've had coaching on strengths. I've taken a class on strengths, and it's really your top 10. You should spend time embracing, looking at, seeing how you could use those strengths, play them out in your life. The first are the leading strengths, and the second 5 are the supporting strengths. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about strengths, other than I do want to go through a PowerPoint to show, I should be able to share my screen, right? Debbie and all, Maggie. So,
Yes.
okay, here we go. Perfect. So here, bear with me just for a minute. I get myself going. Slideshow from the beginning. Okie doke. Now I'm getting all kind of granular with you for a while. Technically, what they're assessing in this process are your talents. And if you haven't taken this assessment, what I suggest you do is buy a book and get the code, or just maybe some of you have. And by the way, this is a good time for people who've taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment to put your top 5 in the chat. I think that would be fascinating for your club members to know. It's good for me to know. Then the talents are really those unsullied gifts of ours, right? Those natural ways in which we show up in the world, the way we believe, we think, we act. And you take the talent and then you multiply it times investment. So let's take the obvious talent for this group, communication. You may have a knack for communication. Obviously, all of you do have spoken so far. Yet, people like Jennifer, people liking on our, and Kathy I'm just thinking of a couple of people I remember who are longtime Toastmasters. They've been putting a lot of investment into that. Look at all the speeches they've given over the years, the knowledge they've acquired, the transition they've made from the former program now to Pathways. That's investment. You multiply them and you get a strength. Does that make sense? And when you have that strength, you nail it. You just hit it out of the park practically every single time. Whatever it is you're doing, you're good at. Now, how might you wonder, how do I know what my strengths are? So if you go into that PDF that was sent to you, you can get a link to at least a list of the strengths. And when you eyeball them, you could say, oh, yeah, includer. Oh, I'm always doing that. That's kind of my knack. It is. So you can kind of pick them out, I think. And then when you're doing it, when you're catching on and someone's just teaching you how, or you're in a Toastmasters club, you're just learning how, you pick up things pretty quickly. You're like, oh, I get that now. And pretty soon you're evaluating, you're doing all these different communication types of strengths. Then when you're in that time, it flows by. Well, we do have timers in Toastmasters to keep us honest and on track, but it's just magical because you're having so much fun. And then now and again, you say, wow, that was a fabulous table topics I just did. I can't believe I did that. Oh my gosh. And when you're done, you're like, when can I do that again? Those are just a few ways to kind of get a sense of when a particular talent could really become a strength. Now we're switching over to social media. Let's think about the social media sites any of us might use. Facebook would be the obvious, but especially for a younger crowd, it could be more Instagram, could be Twitter, could be TikTok. For me, it's LinkedIn. I would say I have a love affair, Jennifer, with LinkedIn, almost equal to my love affair with Toastmasters. Well, and then there's a 50-year marriage, but that's also a wonderful thing to have in real life too. So at anyway, that I think your strengths might even lend itself to how you handle your social, what you want the sites you're on. And then let's use LinkedIn as an example. How do you structure the about? What do you talk about you in your about section of LinkedIn? And if you were really sort of a geeky person, the opposite of me, who has analysis, analytical as the bottom one, pretty sad but true, but so I have to farm out my analytical projects. So someone more analytical could have more like data in that about section, just as an example. Types and number of your connections. So people often ask me as a LinkedIn tutor and trainer, well, how many connections should I have? I said, it really depends. Depends on you and the field you're in and so many things. Someone like me, who is one of my strengths being the woo, winning others over, that's to a large extent, the more the merrier. Not that I don't always accept people, I've ignored them, I've blocked them, But the other day, when Sonia was visiting the local district, my district's Toastmaster Leadership Institute, and she looked like a pretty sharp lady, and I'm looking her up on LinkedIn, all nosy, like when I knew she was from a different district. I go, oh, wow, I think I'd like to connect with her. So I send her a Zoom. First, I messaged her through, the chat, said, could I send you a LinkedIn invite? She said, fine. And then I went on to send her that LinkedIn invite. So that's something somebody who's winning others over would do. They're bold. They're like, okay, we should meet. Like, there's people right now, you'll be getting a LinkedIn invite from me by the end of this meeting. Trust me, because I really want to connect with you. And if you don't get one, reach out to me, because maybe I can't remember all of you. So that's what I'm like. Then when you post, but I should say the other side would be more like a relator. Like when you were talking, Kathy, about your boss and those stories and the funny stories, I thought, no, that's someone likes to develop close relationships, with his team. So then that's more someone like you would have fewer connections, probably. You'd go deeper with your connections. You would engage with fewer people in a perhaps deeper, again, and more, some might say meaningful way, but just again, not quite as perhaps superficial as someone like I might, although I do my best to be deep. As someone said, I bring a lot of joy and wisdom to them through my post. And so so that's really, and then the posting is kind of these two slide together, the kind of things you post about. So I'm a very positive person. I've seen other LinkedIn tutors and coaches complain about things they see on LinkedIn. I'm like, life's too short. I don't need to do that. Let's go positive. So I always look at the upside and apply that theme really to my posts and also to the way I engage with other people. And even when you think about it, possibly communicating privately, your direct messages on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, people can use their strengths in different ways, even in that. Now, here's the big reveal. Well, if you've looked at the whole slide deck, this is not a surprise. Here are my 5 strengths, and then I'll segue from here then over to, I've already said a little bit about how they tie into my use of social media. Now, in case you hadn't already figured it out, I am an activator. I'm that energizer bunny. I'm the person who lights the fire under a person, under a club, under whatever, under myself. Heck, I'm 73 years old. I really have all this energy, and it would be awfully sad if I didn't have any place to use it, which kind of ties into positivity. Because positivity is that kind of person, they walk in the room and it already feels better, right? They have this contagious feeling, like it's upbeat, it's just different. And people will just unsolicited come to me after a talk I give and say, I love your energy. Like they don't say they love my dress or anything, no, I love your energy, which is the best compliment I can get. And I've already talked, a fair amount about the winning others over. And then, communication figures, right? And I think even before Toastmasters, I had a knack for communication. But as I said, a few minutes ago, because of the fact that I've gotten all this time to practice it and I get to do a lot of speaking in my business life, I keep getting these chances to put my thoughts into words, into speaking, and I would add into writing also. And finally, connectedness. I have a couple of thoughts to wrap up with, and they definitely tie to connectedness because I truly believe that almost every event happens for a reason. Simply the fact, get this, that when I met Sonia, because she happened to come to the District 26 Toastmaster Leadership Institute, and she happens to tell me the district and she happens to tell me she's in this very club. Okay, hold that thought. Then Debbie finds me on LinkedIn and asks me to come and speak at this club. And I go, what was the name of that again? She speaks, she leads. Isn't Sonia in that club? Heck yes, she goes. I'm like, figures, just figures. So that's what happens when you really believe in connectedness. Okay, so then last slide, except for a couple of resources. Now, activators. I work with older people. Do you know anybody over 55 who kind of resists social media? Maybe you are one of those people. Okay, Jennifer, you raise your hand. I love it. Honestly, you know what they say? They'll go like this. Well, I don't do social media. Like I don't gamble. Like it's a terrible thing. I'm like, get over yourself. I don't care how old you are. LinkedIn, especially, is different than all those other social media. Okay, you can feel however you want about them. I don't care. LinkedIn is a tool. And you're a job seeker, you run a business, you better get your butt into LinkedIn, and I'm going to show you how. I maybe don't use exactly those words, but that's what I'm trying to do. Positivity, as I said before, I use it a lot. Think how you could write recommendations for people on LinkedIn, Google reviews, and be positive. Obviously, you would be, help other people showcase themselves. There's so many ways to be positive. And I've already told you the story about winning others over, that I'm really unapologetic, I guess might be the word, about reaching out to people. If they don't want to accept my invite, that's okay. But when people can reach back to me, mostly I'm accepting. But once in a while, I'll say, oh, how did you happen to find me? Or, what made you reach out to me? And then communication, really kind of address that. Is such a gift. My mom was a teacher. My dad never met a stranger. Oh my God. He was like, woo, up the yin yang. And so I have these really lovely kind of hardwired gifts through my DNA that lead into good communication. And then very strong faith. In fact, I would join your club in a heartbeat if I didn't have Alan on every Saturday morning. I'll just, get a little, I don't usually reveal that part of my life, but yet it's important for me. And so because of that, I have this connectedness sense all the time. And it's a wonderful way to go through life when you believe that. And then that can kind of come through, say you're on Facebook or Instagram and you see a post and it really touches you deeply. And you like direct message that person back, like, I was just thinking about that. There was a book I read recently. I did that with my former minister when she had this lovely quote in this post on Facebook. So just be thinking about those kinds of things. Well, I'm trying to see, how am I doing on time, Kimberly? So I'm pretty good, I think. I'm not to my 20 yet, right, Kimberly? Okay, so that's great. So now is when we talk amongst ourselves and find out, Kathy, why don't I have you lead this off? Because you already mentioned something in the networking time, how you have used your strengths. As you've said, you've taken Clifton Strengths a couple times.
I have, actually. And for me, what I really leaned into was the learner strength. And so that gave me enough encouragement to apply for a position that I didn't have, an entire background on. So I'm a project manager in pharmaceutical and biotech, and most of my time had been spent in drug development, and I didn't really know anything about medical affairs. And medical affairs is where there will be people from the company that will go and speak with the doctors, not to sell, but to talk about the medicine. And since it was something different from drug development, knowing that I was a learner and was a little stuck in what was then my current position, I went ahead and applied for the position, and I got it. And it was a really good experience for a year. I learned a lot. And, by the time the year was up, I needed to move on. But I liked that my results gave me a little bit of a push. It's like, because learning, I guess, from my home life, and that was really easy. But taking that into the work life, that was more of a challenge for me. So having those results saying, oh, well, it's like, this is why you might want to go for it, because you're already doing it in part of your life. Why don't you expand that?
That's perfect. Maybe we can just get like a show of hands, either literally or maybe through the hand sign up, of other people who actually have taken the strengths assessment. Oh, one more thing I should have said for those that haven't taken it. It's 170 statements, paired statements. Are you this way or that way? This way or that way? So you may not have them handy, but if you do, it'd be fun to see them. Any other stories about strengths and how you've applied them to your life? This idea is maybe not exactly novel, but it's not maybe something you've thought about relative to your social media, but maybe after hearing these, my own experiences, you have ideas or how you might start applying them to your social media. Anybody else just want to just unmute and chime in?
Go ahead. This is Natalie. So my top strength is, my top two at least, are ideation and positivity. And what I realized recently is that I have a lot of ideas, but it's also been, what I've realized that when I'm going through a hard time or I'm struggling with something, whether it's, something that's not my strength, for example, consistency is just not, like, I get bored easily.
I'm not gonna lie. From the beginning. Keep going.
It is number one. It's like the last one on my strength finders list. And I was like, And that's because I just get bored and I'm moving on to the next thing. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a situation where, my lack of consistency got in my way. But I got into an activity of ideating with a client of mine where it was literally, I didn't even realize we were just going back and forth and we were just in the flow and ideating on this new program we were designing. And it was like, oh, what are we doing? And next thing you know, an hour flows by and I was like, oh, that's why ideate, it just gave me life back. And so it was just recognizing how it shows up and how not your weaknesses, but the things that obviously need more management. If you're feeling bad, go to something that obviously feeds your strengths, because it was really it reset me. It's like, oh, this is ideation at its height.
Yes. When I have ideation, it's not top 5, probably top maybe 10 or 12. And when I help someone design their LinkedIn headline and we get done and we click save and it comes back and they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I said, you can pay me now. I know we're at the beginning, but this is why people pay me the big bucks, not so big, but that sense of how ideation combined with some of these others, it's like magical. Very cool. Other stories? Anybody else want to pop in here? Love to hear a few, or any questions about this at all. Trying to think of any other examples that come to mind. One thing I was going to say about managing, there's when I was a district director, it was the person who was what's now program quality director. And that gentleman had been difficult for me even back when he was treasurer. Certainly talked to him about in more than one 12-step meeting, I will say, sadly. But at any rate, one of his top 5 was significance. And if anybody has ever read that or knows about it, that person always wants to show up and just look really good. And if you ever breathe a negative word about to that person within earshot of even one other person, like say you were talking to them in a public setting, what happens then is that they just want to, I'll just go because I feel like I can say this in this group. They just want to rip you a new one. They just come off at you. They're so mad because they're so almost humiliated because you said something negative to them. They say praise in public and then correct in private. And that was a big mistake I had been making. And so after I read the StrengthsFinders book and I saw I've been doing that, I felt so badly, even though I didn't like the man. So I really trained myself to be extremely careful about how I handle feedback with him. So I give that as kind of being fairly transparent about a particular challenge that I had. Very challenging. So any, we don't have to go all the way to the 30 minutes, but I thought if there's any other examples that you have, because I have the book out somewhere. Tom Rath has written some other books. And I recently found one out about it's called Life's Big Questions, about ways you can contribute to the world. And there's I'll put it in the chat before the meeting wraps up. It's called Contribify. And Tom Rath is, as I may have said, is the grandson of Donald Clifton. And he's had some major health issues. So he has really been living on borrowed time for many, many years. So he talks about not just what can we do and make ourselves better, but how can we contribute? That really life is really, as Sonia said, is really about giving back. And anyway, it's fascinating book, and I'll put it in the chat. So let me just wrap up with a couple of sort of spiritually related concepts. So love this, folks. I have angel cards, and every day I pick an angel card, and today I picked communication. How perfect is that? But they had phones with cords. Now, I remember those. Maybe some of you have seen a phone with a cord. At any rate, then my minister one year for Christmas gave us all this jar. It looked like a candy jar. And there was an inspiration for each day of the year. She said she would never do that gift again. Can you imagine how much work that would be, 365 of these? Today I read, the positive thoughts I think and the words I speak create my positive experiences. I'm going to read that again. The positive thoughts I think and the words I speak create my positive experiences. And then I might cry because it's so good. I'm going to be just part of this little magazine that I read every day. Today, I boldly take my place in the world as a unique expression of life. Fully human, fully divine, I embrace living with energy and enthusiasm, and joy. My positive outlook and attitude make all the difference. My highest, most vibrant life is mine to create with my thoughts and through my faith. I begin each day grateful for the gift of life. And I'm so, so grateful to get to spend part of my day with this group, this lovely, amazing group. Thanks again to Debbie and to Maggie and to all of you.